fisherman's post. More fish, more often.
Hello and welcome to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. My name is Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post. Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community since 2003, bringing you fishing reports, fishing information, fishing news, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, and now, in this new chapter, a saltwater fishing podcast series. In this podcast series, we call on the local guides and captains from up and down the North Carolina coast to share with us information to help you, the audience, catch more fish more often. And while we say more fish more often, what we're really trying to do ultimately is to get you to spend more time on the water more often with more friends and more families making memories. Today, we're joined by Captain Bob Strange of Strange Magic Fishing Charters out of the Little River area. Bob's going to be talking to us about finding and catching black drums. So this is going to be entirely on the black drum target species. We're going to be talking a little bit about seasonality. Then we're going to go into detail about locating black drum. And then we'll talk about gear, tactics. We're going to spend some time talking about the type of bite of a black drum. And I think Bob has a bunch of information to share with us. Right now, I'm going to introduce you to my co-host, Billy Thorpe. Billy, welcome to another episode.
Hey, Gary, it's good to be back on, man. It's another episode. We're making some good content, so really enjoying it. How have you been doing since the last episode, since last week?
Been doing good.
I think I'm wearing the same shirt.
I've been doing good.
I always wear the same shirt. It doesn't matter. Oh, man. So, well, good. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you guys have joined us. Once again, Gary and I really appreciate it. And what we really appreciate is if you share this podcast with your friends, your family. Here's all the places that you can find the Fisherman's Post podcast. You can listen to it on just about anywhere that you can listen to podcasts. And if we're not on one of those platforms, let us know, and we will submit our podcast to be on that platform. Also, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, the best way to promote or to share is word of mouth. So when you're sipping suds with your buds, share the Fisherman's Post podcast with them. And this is obviously brought to you by Marine Warehouse Center. You can see it here in the middle of our screen. Just an amazing sponsor making this episode possible. So I'm going to go ahead and play a little 26-second commercial from those guys. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is Robbie at Marine Warehouse Center, and we're excited to announce that we are the exclusive North and South Carolina sailfish dealer. Sailfish offers an offshore capable boat with tons of family-friendly features. Whether you're a hardcore offshore fisherman or you just want to island hop, Sailfish can do it all.
That's a good-looking boat right there, Gary.
You know, I saw that boat I saw that boat in person. I just had my boat. I just dropped it off to Marine Warehouse Center. They're going to paint the bottom of the boat. And which brings up an interesting fact about Emmett, one of the owners of Marine Warehouse Center. I was floored. Emmett personally came out and on the spot just started scraping the bottom of my boat. He wanted to paint the bottom of my boat personally, he said.
And that's true. This is true.
I don't see any scenario where that would be true. I mean, I didn't even try hard this episode. I didn't even try hard to come up with something plausible.
Man, I'm fooled. Easily fooled.
Ed Emmett's too busy to do something like that. I mean, he's managing two stores, the Charleston location. But I imagine he would do a good job if he did paint the bottom of the boat.
Well, Gary, I'm going to show you a fish. I'm going to show you a fish right here. Submitted by one of our viewers, Mookie Powers with a black drum caught in the Bald Head Island Creek. The fish hit a piece of frozen shrimp. I think maybe we'll talk about frozen shrimp and black drum today. Maybe that's going to be a part of the topic. So excited about that.
If Bob Strange doesn't mention the word shrimp, then maybe we didn't invite the right guy in to talk about black drum.
If we don't hear the word shrimp in these podcasts, we're not a saltwater podcast show.
Well, I tell you what, it might be shrimp, it might be something else, but this is a reminder, Billy Thorpe, that at the end of the episode, I am going to be coming to you to ask you what is the best Billy takeaway. What's the best takeaway piece of information that you got from our conversation today with Bob Strange?
All right, I'm ready.
All right, so let's introduce our guests. Let's introduce the talent. Welcome to the show, Captain Bob Strange of Strange Magic Fishing Charters out of the Little River area. How you doing, Bob?
Doing great, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you look good. You look just as I remember you from the winter fishing schools. So today we're talking about black drum, finding and catching black drum, and we're going to cover certain areas. Before we start talking black drum, what I like to say is, hey, people are tuned into this podcast. Why should they listen to what you have to say about black drum?
Well, I've been fishing pretty much all my life, and been boating since I was a little kid with my uncle way back when, and then was originally from Virginia, and then we ended up coming down here many years on vacations and have fished in the intercoastal off boats since the early 90s. And so hopefully by now I have a little knowledge I can pass on to everyone.
All right. Billy, that work? You ready?
I'm satisfied.
All right.
Let's pass the test.
So now we're going to start with the seasonality of black drum and then move into locations. But there is a feature on the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast series. It's the 2 questions. And while I say these 2 questions aren't fishing related, I actually broke my own rule. I kind of have fishing related questions. But what I'm going to do is to mix it up. I'm going to put this question to both you and Billy.
All right.
The South Carolina record black drum, and Bob is pretty thorough, so he may have found this out before I even asked this question doing black drum preparation. What is the weight of the state record black drum in South Carolina? Your best guess?
I think it's 93, if I remember correctly.
Billy, higher or lower?
I'm gonna go lower by a pound. I'm gonna go lower.
89 pounds.
Oh.
Port Royal. I'm not even sure where Port Royal is in South Carolina. All right, question number 2. North Carolina record black drum, estimated weight.
I'll say 106 on that one.
106.
Let me think. I'm gonna go 93 pounds.
I should have made you go first instead of Bob going first 2 times. It was actually 100 pounds,
Oh man.
1 ounce.
Man.
The guy wanted to get that 1 ounce in there.
100 pounds and 1 ounce.
So we're not going to be talking about 89 and 100 pound black drum. We're going to be talking about black drum with Bob Strange that makes for great table fare. Bob, help us out with just understanding sort of the general habits of black drum over the calendar, seasonality.
Yep. Well, I always say most fish that are inshore, which is what I do, all the fish that you target are always going to be seasonal to a certain degree, more or less based on water temperature. Black drum, at least the juveniles, will hang around the estuaries probably all year long. And those are the guys that are probably anywhere from 1 to 3 years old, and they're probably 20 inches and below or below. And the bigger ones that are the more of the breeder fish will hang out until they'll probably come in maybe late winter, early spring, and then hang out till the fall, and then go out and do their thing out in the ocean, and then come back.
So as far as the calendar year, the best time for you putting clients on a handful of fish for the cooler, your favorite time to target them?
Well, I would say there's probably very few people who actually just go out specifically fishing for black drum. Most black drum are going to be around where redfish are, and also trout to a certain degree. So a lot of times, if you're out and you're having a tough day, you can try to make up with it with doing some black drum fishing. So I always have in my boat, I always have fresh shrimp. So I'm getting back to your shrimp message there, but frozen shrimp is okay if that's the only thing you can get. But if you just go to a regular seafood store, I know we have Platts here in Cherry Grove. They have as much fresh shrimp as you want, and that seems to work a little better because the shell's a little tougher and everything. Obviously, if you can net some fresh shrimp, that would be even better. Little fiddler crabs are great. If you can make friends with a crabber, get a couple couple crabs and quarter them. Things like that. Anything that has a smell or a shell, you're going to be in good shape.
All right. Well, I tell you what. Before we get into like the tactics of targeting them, my belief is that people would love to have as much insight as you can share, as you can communicate on finding them, on finding black drum. Because I get it, man. Maybe we're not targeting them, but everyone at some point gets to the point where they're like, man, I would just love to put some fish in the boat, especially some fish in the boat that I could eat. So help us out as best you can. Let's not even cover the calendar year, where this is coming out in the summer. So let's just do a general summer presentation of the locations, the locales that people can look for to find a black drum bite.
Right. Well, we're kind of blessed in our area with some pretty big tides. When I say that, the difference between high and low, especially if you get a full moon or a new moon, it can be all the way up to 6 feet. So structure is pretty key. The best way to find structure, obviously, and this is true for all inshore species, is to go, especially if you don't know the area that well, go at low tide and see where all the oyster bars are, and look at all the docks. Black drum are real structure oriented, so they really prefer anything that will give them a little bit of comfort as far as structure goes. So that would be anything from docks to shelly areas, especially since that's their primary diet. Especially shelly areas that like what we have in the intercoastal that will drop off quickly to give them a quick escape route. And if you see transition areas, especially if you trying to pick a certain dock, a dock near where a creek drain comes out of the marsh, or if you are in back of a creek, and especially at lower tides, the deeper holes, all the fish tend to get a little more concentrated. So if you can go and mark on your fish finder where those deeper holes are, especially if they're near oyster bars or oysters on the side, that's really what you want to look for. And typically those areas will hold fish of some kind. Now, whether or not they'll always be there, that's the other question. But that's why you always want to move. If you throw out and you don't get bites right off the bat, or in the first 10 or 15 minutes, you might as well go. Okay, so I'm gonna have you walk me through that sort of list with a little bit more detail. So let's start with structures such as docks. So if I have it in my mind that I want to dock fish today and just sort of see what I can uncover, and black drum or whatever, I get that we're looking for something else. So if I'm targeting docks, am I looking to toss it right underneath the dock, as close to the pilings as possible, up underneath? And is it a deeper water dock? Is it tide moving? Like, help me paint out, like, I know that it varies, but perhaps a best case scenario or just generalities to look for. Most fish prefer a little bit of moving tide. You don't have to. You just don't want to fish the slack tide. If it's slack, then there's not going to be a whole lot of movement as far as the water, and also usually the bait as well. If you can if you're looking for docks, let's just say at a higher tide, you can pretty much fish the whole dock from where it comes off the shoreline all the way out to the end. If you are fishing there, you do want to try to get your bait up underneath the pilings as best you can. If you have a power pole and you can get up underneath, you can anchor with that'd be awesome. Or if you have a trolling engine, you can put it on the anchor feature and throw up underneath. That would be the best way to do things. And I like to use either a Carolina rig, usually depending on how fast the current's going. Again, we have 2 highs and 2 lows, as do most of the guys that are fishing around here. And the tide, obviously, in the middle of the tide is when the water's moving the fastest, both in a rising and a falling tide. So with more movement, you need more weight. You really want to put it in a place where it will remain a little bit more static. So therefore, you've got a little more control over that. But I would look for that, and then also look for your deeper holes at lower tides, especially in creeks, and depending on what if you're just concentrating on your docks right now. Okay, and so as far as you said, shelly banks, and I know the Little River area, so there's some banks that we would describe as shelly banks,
but I guess you're also talking about oyster bars as well. Are those the two different types of areas to fish? I just want to make sure I understand.
Right. Right. If you're going down the intercoastal waterway, and that's primarily where all the docks are. There's very few docks and creeks because they're usually not big enough or deep enough to have them. But so docks will probably primarily be where you want to look in the intercoastal. Deeper holes would be on your creeks that come off of the intercoastal waterway. And there's a lot of backwaters in Little River, and so it always pays to try to explore all those areas and make either a mental note or marker on your GPS where those deeper holes are, so you can come back to those, especially at lower tides. And the oyster, any kind of oyster, either oyster bar in the middle of a creek, or if you notice if you're going down the intercoastal waterway and there's a nice drain that comes off near a dock that's got a lot of oysters in it, especially if you see other signs such as birds. If you see some egrets there, blue herons, they're feeding. Obviously, there's bait there, and the more bait, the more fish are going to be there. And you can, if you're going down creeks and you see, especially in a couple weeks here when all the shrimp start getting a little bit bigger, you see shrimp kind of popping off to the sides. That means there's going to be a lot of bait there, and that's going to be a good place where black drum will want to hang out and try to snare those shrimp.
And then final question, I guess, on locales, like a deeper hole, like an 8-foot hole, like I like numbers, and I know that you can't necessarily quantitate deeper hole, but maybe give us an example.
Well, if you have like of course, the higher the tide, the deeper the hole is going to be, obviously. But if at lower points of the tide, we'll say maybe couple 3 hours on either side of the low, if you can find a nice hole that's got about 8, 9, or even 10 or 12 feet of water in it, that's going to be a really good place to look, especially if it's near other structure, like a bend in a creek, a place where you've got eddies, a place where you've got some other structure that comes off, or if you've got like a big point, or if you any kind of oysters or again shrimp popping out of the water is going to be a great sign for you.
All right, so I tell you what, I was listening to you and thinking about this transition, and often we go to rigs, sort of following this, or we go to tactics. I'll let you dictate this because I'm not sure if we should go to bait, because I'm guessing the different bait you use might affect the rig, but maybe not. So I'll let you call the next step in this discussion. If we talk about pulling up and anchoring and positioning, or are we going to talk about bait and then how you fish the bait, or then rigs and then what bait you use to fish the rigs? You tell me what makes the most sense for you.
You can. I always like to say the less weight you can get away with, the better, because the better feel you have for it. However, if you've got a strong current, then you obviously need more weight because you won't be on the bottom. So if you can get away with a quarter inch or a quarter ounce jig head, that'd be awesome, because you can really feel up. You just want to make sure you're feeling that bottom and you feel it bump along. If you've got a pretty good current, you may have to go to a half to a 3/4 ounce Carolina rig and use that again, just making sure that you're on the bottom. And it's fine your bait doesn't necessarily have to be static in one spot. If you're fishing underneath a dock, that's probably a little more important, because of the fact that if you let it move around too much, obviously you're going to get hung around the pilings and everything. If you're in a creek and you're working a deep hole, you can cast upstream and let that just kind of bump along. That's fine. Different types of bait. Again, anything with shells is going to be fine. All the bait shops have either shrimp. Most of the bait shops probably only have frozen shrimp, but again, you can get that fresh shrimp just at your seafood market, and you can get those fiddler crabs, and you can get crab pieces. All those kind of things are going to work real well.
I want to talk more about the rig. So if I'm using a 1/4 ounce jig head, or I'm starting with a 1/4 ounce jig head, hoping that the lightest will work. Is there a particular type of jig head you like? I'm thinking more along the line, not necessarily brand, but more along the lines of like a longer shank, shorter shank. And then what about a knot and leader? Like, cause I'm always curious about, is a loop knot better for action, or with this kind of fishing, just any kind of cinch knot that's going to hold better? And then again, like what your thoughts are on leader for this rig, for the
Right.
jig head.
Yeah, I mean, I usually use a 15-pound braided wire or braided line, and then have a 20-pound fluoro leader. Usually anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. Yeah, yeah, you can make it a little bit longer in case you get broke up, then you can just kind of work your way on up. Uh, the length of the hook it's probably not that important. Black drum have a tendency that their mouths are not. I think your last podcast was a flounder. Flounder have got huge mouths. Black drum, with the exception of the ones that are get up to be like 5 or 6 years old, have got a little bit smaller type of mouth, and their mouths are oriented downwards, so they're definite bottom feeders. So that's why it's important for your bait to be on the bottom, or approximate the bottom. You can also use a slip float rig, which would be fine too if you measure the water depth and have it a foot or two off the bottom. You can be successful with that too, and you get less hang-ups. However, hook type I don't think is really that crucial. A black drum has got a very, very tough mouth, so once you hook a black drum, it's not coming off. It'll stay in there very well. I mean, it's the same with a redfish. A redfish has got a very similar type mouth that's oriented downward. They're all part of that croaker family, so their mouths are pretty tough. Once you get a hook, you get a good hook set in there, they're not going to get off.
All right. So then, same question for Carolina rig. Maybe you have a specific hook style at least, or hook size to recommend, and then again, your thoughts on leader.
Yeah, I think if you get like a 2.0, 3.0, you don't have to get too fancy on these things. I make all those myself, and you can go real fancy, go to Bass Pro and spend twice as much, or you can go to Walmart and get the same thing. Yeah, and so you don't have to get too crazy as far as technique goes and whatnot. I think a lot of people will go out and probably experiment with different things. So anytime one of us guides comes on, it's not the Bible as far as size of hook and shank. And some guys like circle hooks, some guys like modified, some guys like Kale, some guys like a straight J. I don't think it's that crucial. Okay. I think if you present your bait to a fish, you're going to catch.
All right. So we have our bait. You've gone over some bait options. We've got either a jig head or a Carolina rig, and we've thrown it out to our structure or our oyster rock or our deep hole. And now, let's assume that Billy doesn't know what he's doing on a boat and that Billy isn't very fishing fluent. How would you advise Billy?
That's a good assumption, Gary. Thanks.
Yeah, I've just made that up. How would you advise Billy to, look for a black drum bite and to actually set the hook and seal the deal on the black drum bite and not lose the black drum bite?
Right. Well, especially when you fish with anything that has a lot of scent to it, and just for simplicity's sake, we'll say that you have fresh shrimp on your line, and you can just break those things in half and just put that little small piece on there. You can catch huge fish with just a small piece of shrimp. Reason being is because everything likes shrimp. So you can always eat your bait if you don't catch any fish. But at any rate, a black drum bait as well as a red drum bite are going to be a lot different than your trash fish. Your trash fish being a pinfish and a croaker and a whiting or something like that. Those type of bites will be a little more. I always say it's kind of like a machine gun. So it's kind of like they're just kind of pulling at the bait. They're not really sucking into their mouth. Black drum like to mouth the bait. So what they will do is it'll be a lot more methodical type of bite. So they'll kind of when they suck that, they'll kind of mouth that bait a little bit until they're 100% sure what it is. So you'll feel something that's kind of like maybe like a 1 or a 2 or a 3 that it's just very, very slow and very, you'll definitely mark that. And then after about the second, third, and as soon as you feel a little bit of pressure on there, they're trying to take off with that bait. That's really when you want to set that hook real hard. And then after that, they're great fighters, and they're a lot of fun to catch. And you'll definitely know if you're hooked onto a black drum, because they'll take off. And the bigger ones that are 15 plus inches, they'll make nice runs for you, and it's a lot of fun. And but the bite is definitely a lot different than a trash fish, and that's why if you get into an area that you're getting a lot of those rapid bites, those little machine gun bites, you want to try to move on, or at least move your bait around a little bit. So there's a lot more of the small fish than there are the bigger fish, like the black drum. So if you can move your bait around a little bit in that hole that you're in, or wherever you are underneath the dock, and try to find those guys. A lot of times those little small fish will bite and pick at that bait, and they're just kind of trying to pick it off. That's why a lot of times if you go to try to set a hook on that little machine gun bite, that's why that bait comes off, because they're just pulling it off. They're not really eating it off. But a black drum, sometimes from all that little bit of chum that's made from those fish biting at it, will get attracted to the area. They've got real big nasal nares there, so their smell is their sense of smell is just incredible.
So have you found that one bait choice more than another will, help keep the bait on longer and won't let the pinfish steal it? Because I wrestle with that too. I mean, I'm aware, like, all right, if these little fish are at my bait, then they're kind of making a little chum slick. They're bringing attention to it. However, if they're at it too long, then I'm basically got an empty hook out there and I have zero chance of success. So,
That's right.
As we're heading into the summer and as those little undesirables become more and more plentiful, what's your best tip for trying to outlast those guys other than moving? I mean, I heard you're move the bait around. But any, filler crab, anything that you would recommend over something else if it's really a problem?
Well, the filler crab's going to stay on there a little bit better. It won't be pulled off as much, and it probably doesn't emit as much stink. So you won't quite get the amount of pinfish and small fish that you normally get with a regular piece of fresh shrimp. The frozen shrimp is going to come off probably a little easier because of the fact that since it's been frozen, the shell's not going to be quite as strong, so that'll come off a little bit easier. I would say that if you're if you're a weekend guy going out there, probably the easiest thing, don't get too crazy. I mean, you can throw a net for shrimp, but sometimes you'll throw a net for an hour and a half, and you'll only have maybe a couple dozen shrimp, and then after about the first 15 minutes of getting bit off with all the live shrimp, you won't have anything left. So probably the easiest thing to do is just go get that fresh shrimp from the fish store and just break them in half with your fingers, and you can, if you double hook them, you're going to do just fine with that. You'll blow through a lot of bait. There's no doubt about it. But that's why you want to move around, because if the bigger fish are not there, you'll know pretty quick, because of the fact that you'll just get all that the small bites, and if you move around a lot enough, you'll know. And then again, you can use hopefully your past knowledge from where the fish are at what time of the year in different places to help you out with that as well.
So what have I not set you up to answer so far? I mean, I think, I like our seasonality. I like our location talk. I like our gear, tactics, bait type, bite type. It seems pretty thorough. What else would you share with my viewers?
Well, if you're, of course, being a bottom fish, if you're not getting hung up a fair amount, you're probably not going to be in a place where they're going to be. You got to have a shelly bottom, and it's okay if it transitions from a sand to shell, but you need some kind of shell around there, because that's the stuff they like to eat. And if you can, I like to try. I've kept a diary for years, and there's definitely a pattern that goes on with water temperature as well as time of the year. And if you have a certain area where you fish, and you notice that there's different times of the year, different types of fish are hitting on different types of things. That's really what you want to try to base things off of as well. If you go out there blind all the time, you make your chances a lot more difficult. So you want to try to increase your chances of catching things. So if you have that past knowledge that you can put to your use, you can think, well, gee, the last couple of years I've been in this one spot at this one particular month, and it seems like it works pretty well in this one spot. But then a month later, I'm not doing anything, or a month before I wasn't doing anything. And if you can cut it down like that, that's going to really help out quite a bit. So things like that are just little simple things. Look for signs that there's bait around, and you'll increase your chances as well.
Okay. And then I think this is one of my last questions. As far as cohabitation goes, if I'm having a hook with shrimp out there, hoping to catch a black drum, what other species are most likely to be right in that same zone? That I might want to just throw another bait out of a different flavor just to sit and be in that location. What mostly hangs out with the black drum?
I'd say their cousins, the redfish, or red drum, are going to be, a lot of times in the same place, especially around docks. And then you'll find probably redfish will probably be more maybe up on the shoreline, especially at higher tides. Black drum have a tendency to kind of move around a little bit more, and redfish probably in the summertime probably don't school up as much. Black drum probably will school up a little bit more. So that would be a good thing to look for. It is kind of funny getting back to a little bit different type of bait too. You can catch black drum on artificials, but they usually have to have stink to them. So if you use some kind of gulp bait, you can catch them on a popping cork, which is it's kind of fun to do that. But so it doesn't necessarily have to be all like a natural bait. So gulp will sometimes work too, but of course you're going to have a lot more success with natural bait.
Okay. Bob, I know that, with your fishing background, you're more than a black drum captain. You're more than a black drum guide service. How about walking me through, how about giving me a highlight reel through the calendar year? Someone who watches this and says, man, that's someone I'd like to fish with. What are the different trips you present throughout the calendar year?
Yeah, we do all the inshore species. We do the speckled trout and redfish and black drum, and we'll throw a bluefish or a Spanish in there every once in a while, and obviously flounder. And hopefully North Carolina will open up the flounder fishery here pretty soon, since we're right on the border. So we do a little bit of everything. Now, different things during different times of the year. We fish year round, so we catch different things at different times of the year more prevalently. In the fall, everything is pretty much biting because they're all preparing either to head out after that mullet run, or they're sensing that the year is coming down to the end. But we can catch after that we can catch a speckled trout through most of the winter. So there's a lot of good things around.
You got a favorite black drum recipe?
Well, I tell you, I like anything on the grill.
All right,
is wonderful, and black drum too. If you clean those things, they're a little tricky. So you just don't want to just go straight down. You go on YouTube and find a good video that'll help you out, so you can get a good fillet out of that thing.
Bob, thank you so much. I mean, I've enjoyed our talk about the black drum. I think it's an underrated species, and I think it's certainly become more familiar, with some flounder closures. But I appreciate you coming on and trying to help us all catch more black drum.
Yep. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Bob. Billy.
What a show.
I hope you were paying attention.
What a show. I was.
I think the way he laid it out, to put this a better way, I think even you could go out and catch a black drum.
How did I know that was the next sentence coming out of your mouth, Gary? He put it out there so easily that you can figure it out. I appreciate that.
You got it.
Well,
so what was your the Billy Thorpe or the Billy best takeaway moment, piece of advice from that podcast?
I'd probably say Shelly Bottoms. That's something I didn't, of course, I've only caught one black drum in my life, and it was probably 60 plus pounds. So I don't really know that much about black drum fishing, but you knew I was going to share that because I showed the picture earlier. But anyway, no, that's good to know. Like, like go look for, if it's Shelly bottom stirring stuff up. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, man, I agree. Wrap us up. Let's put this podcast in the books and thank everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, just want to thank Marine Warehouse Center here in Wilmington, North Carolina, for being the sponsor of this episode and making it possible. So those guys are selling boats like crazy. Go over there and check them out. And then also be sure to share this podcast. Here are a bunch of different platforms on the screen. If you can't see it, it's Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. And be sure to subscribe to those channels. And every time that you do, you'll get a little notification. If you don't know how to subscribe, go to our website. There's a little podcast tab. Click on that, and I have a tutorial video to walk you through how to subscribe on all those different platforms. And once again, be sure to tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best way. So, yeah, Gary, that's it, man. Another great episode in the books.
That's right. We'll see you next week. Thank you all.
Thank you.